Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento. And if you have ever been wondering about how you can take your corporate career and turn it into an amazing business that serves other people, then today's episode is exactly for you. And even if you're not in that space and you're thinking, how do I grow a successful business that positively serves people who have real needs beyond just marketing and all these other things? This is someone who is helping people in the career space. We're all going to learn from her commitment to service, her commitment to delivering results. There's going to be so much that we learn from today's guest. Her name is Ellie Hoekman. Ellie is a career coach and the founder of Rock and Secure. I'm going to talk about her company name in a little bit because I love companies that even their name is all about action. The name comes from the idea that if you can learn how to rock your interview, you can secure some awesome job offers. Ellie's niche is helping professionals in the industrial and organizational psychology field, which is a very specific type of psychology focused on improving the workplace and using organizational strategy for business success. So if you've ever heard that the riches are in the niches, we're going to talk about how to identify and get in front of those exact people that you want to help with your business. I'm personally very excited about this one, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Ellie Hoekman. All right, Ellie, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm so excited to be here.
Heck yes, we are excited to have you because I love the work that you do. I also love the energy that you put into that work. I feel like it shines through in the way you talk about your business, the way that it expresses even in your messaging. So before we get to the business stuff, take us beyond all of that. Who's Ellie? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Absolutely. I'd love to. Thank you so much for that. Let's start with what I was doing before I was a full-time business owner, because I think that backstory really lends itself to where we're at now. I started my career in recruiting. I was what's called a full cycle high volume recruiter, which basically just translates to I managed the hiring process from start to finish for a ton of people. Recruiting felt right for me at the time because I did like talking to people. But at times I also really hated my job because I would want to just jump through the phone, grab my candidates by the shoulders and shake them and beg them not to say what they were actively saying out loud. But it was through recruiting that I did get my intro into HR and opportunities to do volunteer career coaching. So overall, I am very thankful for the experience. But you see, I have a math brain and I wanted to start using that part of my brain more. And I thought it would be very sexy to be a data analyst. So my background in HR and my data analyst aspirations led me into getting a master's degree in what's called industrial and organizational psychology. I often refer to it as IO psychology because industrial and organizational is such a mouthful. And to translate that into English, you've put it perfectly. It's the psychology of the workplace. So I get my master's degree in IO psychology. I start working as a business intelligence analyst. I do that for 2 years. The job looks great on paper. It pays well. The company is great team, great boss, challenging work, but no passion. I had no passion for it at all. And it was only until one day when my work bestie had actually asked me, what would you do if you won the lottery? And the answer came to me crystal clear. For most people, they would say something like, oh, I'd never work again, or I'd go travel the world. But that wasn't it for me. It was, I would teach high school and college students how to interview. And that response, as well as just how quickly that came to me, stuck with me for a really long time. So about a month later, after thinking about it over and over and over again, I'd woken up in the middle of the night with another crystal clear clarity moment, like as if someone was shaking my shoulders the way I wanted to do to my candidates. And it was shouting at me, follow this idea. So my next step was a series of Googling to identify, can I replace my data analyst salary as a career coach? The answer was absolutely not. Not if you work for an employer. But if you aren't afraid of challenge, there is a way to make a decent amount of money as a career coach. It's to do it yourself and start your own business. And now some might say, well, I can't do that. Maybe never mind on this whole career coaching thing. That's too much. But for me, I felt electrified by the idea of it. And that's why I'm so excited to be here with you, Brian, because it was during those early days, I call them my electric days. I was binging your podcast. I was reading every book I could about starting business. I just remember some of those days being the most fun and energetic days of my life. And they're a big part of how I got to where we're at now. Now running my business full-time as a career coach, working specifically with the industrial and organizational psychology professionals, very fitting, and truly living out my dream. It's been a ride, but a awesome, exciting, and fulfilling ride. And I am just so happy now to be filling out that dream.
Ellie, I so appreciate that overview, and I so deeply appreciate the fact that the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast is also a part of your own entrepreneurial journey. It's so cool. It genuinely means the world to me. And hearing you give that overview, I know both as a podcast host and as someone who's been on other people's podcasts, how difficult it is to answer that first broad question that so many of us ask about, tell us about yourself. And so I don't usually go here this early on in a conversation, Ellie, but I'm going to do it with you because you're not just our average guest. And so we always ask our guests about their zone of genius, and listeners know that this is part of our onboarding flow. And I love what you wrote there. And hearing you give that overview, it just sounds like, I don't know if this is the mathematical side of your brain that thinks so logically, but you're able to convey things so beautifully, Ellie. We're talking about big things here that you help people with, but you absolutely crush it. I think it's a picture perfect example of how we as entrepreneurs can answer that question of who are you? What do you do? How did you get here? So that's why I want to call out your zone of genius, because you wrote right there, while some folks call themselves a wordsmith, I like to think of myself as a speech smith or a phrasing smith, where I can take someone's thoughts, ideas, and experiences and turn that into a beautiful picture, not only using the right words, but the right tonality. Ellie, you've got to unwrap some of that superpower for us, because even beyond just the work that you do, all of us entrepreneurs, every person, this isn't even an entrepreneurial conversation, every single person, that's the challenge that we have, interacting with other human beings. Ellie, where the heck do we start with that?
Yeah, how do I say what I want to say while still maintaining my professionalism and positivity, right? And in an interview context, that's one of the most difficult times, and one of the times where you're going to face that challenge the most. And I started doing, back when I did Instagram videos, and I'm going to be doing more videos on LinkedIn here soon, one of the themes that I had was Professional Phrasing Fridays, which was, how do I phrase something that isn't necessarily attractive, but I can deliver it in a way, how can I package it to make it look nice and sound nice and still convey the message that I want to convey without lying, right? So let's take a great example would be if you are leaving a job because of a toxic work environment, or maybe you have a boss that it's starting to affect your mental health. And so you want to take a step back from your organization. In an interview, that might be too personal, and might not be details that you're ready to say yet. Number two, you might be afraid that would cause them to judge you and criticize you, or take you out of the running for the job that they're going for. So then it becomes, okay, what are the words and what are the phrases and what is the tonality that we're going to use when they ask us the question of, why are you looking to leave your employer? And so what I often have my candidates do is, rather than focusing on why they're leaving, I focus on what's next for them. So I tell them to do a future focus of rather than, this is the negativity experience that I'm having right now, what am I going towards? I also heard a great piece of advice, and I wish I could say where it was from, but it was to take the negativity out of, actually, I do remember where it's from, because the book is right on my desk. It's Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. He says to take the emotion out of negativity and give emotion to positivity. So when we're talking about something negative in an interview context, we want to take the emotion out and focus on the facts. Then when we're talking about something positive towards our future, we want to have that energy and that excitement and a smile on our face. That goes a lot. That goes a lot further in the interview context. So that's really what it comes down to, is how can we take the positivity and pull our energy and emotions towards that positivity, and then we address the facts, the negativity with facts.
Yeah, Ellie, I'm going to call this out for listeners this early on in the conversation, because while we may be talking about job interviews, interviews to me mean podcast interviews. For your everyday entrepreneur, it could mean sales calls. That's a form of an interview, a presentation that we make. All of these things, we're constantly interviewing in all facets of our lives. And so with that in mind, I love the fact that here I was asking you about words and messaging, terms that we use in business. You went straight to emotions, positivity, negativity, and how do we portray all of those things. It's something that all I've ever known since I started my first business at the age of 19 is how to be me. I'll never forget a presentation that I did. It was at a $15 million a year business. It was the first ever time I presented to a board of directors, pitching them my website design services. And Ellie, I led the meeting with, "Hey, what's up, everybody?" And I remember one of the board guys said to me afterwards, he goes, "Did you start by saying, 'what's up?' Was that the first word out of your mouth?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I don't think about it." And it's funny how many contracts we got just because all I ever knew what to do was to be me. And Ellie, it's so clear to me, even in our interactions up to this point, that you are very you. You show up as you with your energy, your excitement, your smile, and all of that permeates everything that you do. Talk to us about, I would imagine in the clients that you help, especially being in the niche that you are, a lot of people might downplay personality, might downplay themselves showing up as authentically them as they are. How's that factor into the best interview possible?
This is a great question. I remember when I was going for my first real job, my first technically job was working volunteer in a cafe when I was like 15. But the first real one where I had to interview, I was about 17 years old, and it was for a retail store. And I remember thinking, I don't need to prepare. I'm just going to be myself and they're going to love me. And I'm going to be super cool and casual and they're going to love me. And telling my mom that, and my mom, who was a hiring manager at the time, being like, I don't know if that's a good idea. So much of my coaching actually comes from the things that my mom told me when I was applying to jobs or advancing in my career. This one stands out because it's kind of the opposite of what you were saying. Because my plan was to just be myself and have my personality. But what I've found is that there is a zone of too much, too casual, and then too professional. And we want to land somewhere in the middle where we're still connecting with the other person, but still maintaining our professionalism. So what I typically think about is the other person. So when we come in and we are in our personality and we're just showcasing our personality like I planned to do at 17 years old, that would have been all about me. I would have been making everything about me and not focusing enough on the hiring manager and the person I was interviewing with. And so this is a mindset shift that I give to a lot of my clients. It's actually not about you as much as you might think. It's actually about the other person. So this applies to interviews. This applies to sales conversations a ton. How can we serve the other person? And if we come in and we're just trying to show off our personality and we haven't prepared and we don't ask them any questions, we're not going to be successful. But on the other hand, if we're too stoic and we don't show who we truly are, then there's no trust. There's no trust built there. And that applies definitely in the interview and sales context of when you trust or when you're in a hiring situation, it's all just a matter of trust.
Ellie, I'll tell you what, that's a nugget bomb or a nugget of knowledge right there, a knowledge bomb for us, because it's one of the first ever sticky notes that I put on my monitor when I started my first business. It was that marketing acronym of WIIFM. What's in it for me? And what you just revealed there, what works in these job interviews, I think is the key to life. Is I even have this conversation a lot of times before we hit record with podcast guests, is they say, what if I don't find the perfect words? What if, this story isn't exactly relevant? And the truth is, Ellie, you and I didn't talk about it before we hit record, but I always tell guests, listeners are thinking through their own lens. They are thinking to apply these things to their own business. And I think that that's such a key to life, is understanding it's really human behavior at the end of it is what we're talking about, whether it's life, business, job interviews, it's all the same. And so with that in mind, I want to ask you about the niche part of your business, because It's the last time I'm going to say it in full. You've already given me permission to just say IO, but for listeners' sake, industrial and organizational psychology. Let's just say IO from here on out. Obviously, it's something that you are very in tune with. Where along the way in your own entrepreneurial journey did you say, this is what I really want to specialize in? I want to focus on these people. I want to go find these people, and I want to serve these people.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick caveat. I was listening to a couple of episodes last night, just to kind of pump myself up for today. And you've recently had on quite a few people who would actually be considered IO professionals based on the work that they do. HR strategic alignment, even Kat from Cat & Co. Operations. One of the things that she mentioned in her interview was that part of what she does is making sure that your employees are happy with the operations. That's kind of an IO responsibility. So IO is actually much more prevalent than we might know. We just might not know what it's called. But once we inform people what it's called, we actually start to see it everywhere. So then let's get into where I started specializing in IO in my entrepreneurial journey. I really owe that to my current business coach and great friend, Daniel Botero, who I will try not to talk solely about, but I have learned so much from him. And one of the things that he and his team and I worked on a lot was identifying a specific niche. And I had niched to Zillennials at one point, which is Gen Z millennials, people who fall right in between like me. And my thinking was, that's a niche. But then Daniel kindly, and the best way a coach can inform me, that's not a niche. And so we started thinking about ideas for niches. And, I remember not wanting to specialize in IO or HR. And my theory for that being, very big limiting belief, I've now come to find out, was that if they're in IO or HR, they already understand how recruiting works. What can I potentially teach them? And come to find out now that is absolutely a limiting belief, because there are tons and tons of IO people who do want help, and they see the value in coaching. They see the value in having somebody who is a strategic partner. So how exactly how we landed on IO, I can't totally remember, but I think it's also a combination of who you were. And I think sometimes some of the best and easiest people to coach are the people who are a couple years behind you. Because you can tell them exactly what you did to get to where you are. You can relate to their struggles. So, if I had 40 years of experience in IO and I was coaching these, graduates or younger professionals, or maybe they're not younger in age, but they're younger to the field, I might be too far removed from where they're at and what they're going through. And that was another big limiting belief I had just starting my business was, am I old enough to be a career coach? Like I was 26 at the time when I started, and I was like, who's going to trust a 26-year-old with their career? And what I now realize is that being a little bit younger actually makes me a little bit more relatable. So more relatable in the sense of I understand what you're going through because I just went through that very recently, but also like I understand the environment you grew up in because I grew up in that same environment, in the same generation. And so now I see my youth as a little bit of a strength instead of a weakness. So there's a couple of limiting beliefs there that held me back from niching down and starting the business. And I think they're important for listeners to hear. Because I'm sure that all of them have their own limiting beliefs that are holding them back from leaving their 9-to-5 or, finally taking the plunge and putting up their website. And working through limiting beliefs is possible and so much easier if you do it with somebody else, like a coach.
Yeah, so well said, Ellie. It really takes me back to one of the earliest entrepreneurial lessons that I learned, and it was through a Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Catch Me If You Can, which is about Frank Abagnale, who was a con artist who had a career that turned out for the better. He ended up helping the U.S. government catch check fraud and a bunch of other things, but one of the cons that he did was he faked his credentials, became a professor at BYU for a summer, and got the best ratings from students. And when they asked him, how did you teach a psychology class, you don't know anything about psychology, nor do you have a degree in order to be a professor. He said, I just had to stay one chapter ahead of them. And I think that we lose sight of that when it comes up to us creating these limiting beliefs. Reminds me of that quote, we're only confined by the walls that we build ourselves. It's so true. And Ellie, you smashed through all of that. You pointed out, though, I think it's such an important part of your journey, coaching. Not only are you a career coach, but you've worked with other coaches. You gave us one example in the business realm. Talk to me about coaching, because we hear that word so much. I think most people don't fully understand the role of a coach and how coaching actually works.
Yeah. The very beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, I went to a bookstore, a secondhand bookstore, and I was like, I'm going to get every business book I can. I'm going to get every book about interviewing. And it was secondhand, so luckily it was not too expensive to get that many books. I think I got like 20. I told you, it was very energetic days. And one of the books I got was How to Be a Successful Career Coach. And page 6 or so said something along the lines of, you are a coach, invest in other coaches, you won't regret it. My response was, okay, maybe for you, but me, I'll be fine. I can figure out anything. There's a billion YouTube videos. There's all these books that I just bought. There's my mom, who is absolutely a genius. But having a designated professional who has done what you want to do and has taught others how to do it, there is no YouTube video, there is no book, there is no resource PDF file that will replace that. It is absolutely magical. And I currently work with Daniel Patera, who I mentioned before, but my first business coach ever, her name is Emily Jane. She got me started. I'm so grateful for my work with her. And she introduced me to the power of coaching because I no longer had to be perfect. I could do things messy, and then she would help me perfect it. And so my perfectionist tendencies were not as in my way anymore because I could do something and send it off to her, and then she would work with me to perfect it. So I think that's one of the magical things about getting a coach in general. And I see that with my clients now too. When I work with them, they finally feel like they're no longer alone in their job search. And I find that is why career coaching is so needed, because in school you have teachers and you have grades, you have tutors. In your work, you have a boss, you have trainers, you have KPIs, key performance indicators, you have performance reviews. So you have support and tracking of your success. In your job search, you have none of that. You don't have anybody telling you what to do. You don't have anybody giving you real feedback. You don't have any way to track your success. I mean, unless you're doing it yourself. And so that's where a career coach can really come in and help. And I think the same thing with business coaching as well, there might be a lot of resources out there, but the actual implementation, I think, is where the magic happens. And having a partner in that implementation, accountability buddy, somebody who has expertise, that's really where the magic happens.
Yeah, for sure. Ellie, all right, I'm going to keep pushing you. I want to keep going down this rabbit hole and talk to us about Rock and Secure. How the heck do you implement these coaching principles, and what's that actual process look like for someone who wants to rock their interview so they can secure that job? What's that look like working with you?
Great question. So the name Rock and Secure, as you introduced, it's rock your interview, secure a job offer. That comes from my experience as a recruiter, again, wanting to just shake my candidates and tell them to stop saying what they were actively saying. And a big mistake that a lot of job seekers make is they focus way too much on their resume when it's actually the interview that gets them the job. What I hate to see is for job seekers to spend so much time and effort and energy on their resume, so much time, effort, and energy on applying to jobs and networking and finding the right opportunities to get into the interview and then fall apart. It really comes down to preparation. Layla Hermosi has said, I might not be the smartest person in the room. I might not be the most experienced person in the room, but you can bet your bottom dollar that I will be the most prepared person in the room. And she has attributed that to a lot of her success. And when she had said that, she said it in a YouTube video that I was watching as I was getting ready one morning. I was like, that's me. And that's actually exactly what I try to teach my clients too. So if we even think about how I shared my story with you when we first started the podcast, I didn't come up with that off the top of my head. That's preparation. That's taking time to reflect on what my story is and write it down and practice it out loud. I even recorded it in a voice memo and listened to it a couple of times so I could hear what it sounded like. So preparation is a big, big key to interview success. But a lot of people do not know how to prepare adequately. What do I need to research? What do I need to know? What stories do I need to prepare? And now my IO background has helped me realize that you can actually pretty much figure out what they're going to ask you by looking at the job description. And if you can pull out the skills that they're looking for and the areas of expertise that they're looking for within the job description, and you prepare a story to speak to each of those skills or each of those areas of expertise, then you can pretty much answer any interview question that comes along because you've got a story prepared that answers that question. So that's really what it comes down to. And then there is, of course, the actual practice and the actual saying it out loud, because you can fill out a worksheet of all of those stories, but who's to say what that's going to sound like when you actually perform it in the interview. So actual practice out loud with another human being is another big part of what makes my clients successful once they go into interviews. It's through that practice. It's tough. It's hard because it feels unnatural. It can feel weird. You're putting yourself out there to be criticized and give feedback. And that's where I think I do a good job of when I am providing that feedback to candidates. I think I do a good job of creating a safe space of, hey, any feedback I give you is to help you, and it's to help you achieve your goals and get better at interviewing. And so hopefully they see it that way too, but it doesn't mean that it's not scary. So that's really what it comes down to. It's the preparation and the delivery.
Yeah, I love that, Ellie, especially because having done research on your business, it just seems to me like you've thought about all the different parts of not only the process, but all the different ways that you can support them throughout that process. And so you already know, because you've heard some other episodes I love transitioning and talking to you, not just as the subject matter expert, but as one of us, as a fellow entrepreneur, because success leaves clues. And there's a reason why you're able to so deeply serve your clientele. And that's because you've structured it in a way that serves them. And your offer, I even love what you include. You've got online training modules. This is so near and dear to my heart. This is like a big component of what helped Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur grow is weekly office hours. You do that where people can just pop in and interact with you. You have Slack support. You have unlimited interview practice sessions, to that point you just made about the fact that you actually have to do this thing. Talk to us about how you've structured that, because what I really appreciate, I'm a business junkie, you know this about me, is that I love its ability to serve intimately, but also scale. So I'd love to hear, with your entrepreneurial hat on, how you've structured this in a way that really serves these people.
Great question. It comes back to my data analyst background, actually. I go through the clients that I've worked with as a volunteer when I was starting my business, the ones that I kind of put through a beta test, and then the clients that I currently serve. I'm always tracking their success. I'm tracking what they got the most help from and what actually led to their offer. So then I prioritize the elements that were the most helpful. So something like doing practice interviews. I've gotten feedback over and over again that is probably one of the most helpful things from the entire program. So I make that unlimited. I also just really like doing them. So it's not necessarily scalable, but where I'm at right now is working for me, and I love doing them. Other things I think about when it comes to structure is theory of constraints. So if you are not getting any interview invitations, we need to work on your application's networking resume first. Because if we don't have interview invitations and we do all this interview prep and you never get to use it, you will get to use it at some point, but we ultimately have to work kind of step by step. And so that's also how the program is structured. So we talk about the training modules. They're structured by becoming magnetic, rocking your interview, securing the job offer. Because of that theory of constraints of you can only grow to the constraint. I can't remember what the exact quote is, but you can basically only grow up to your constraint. And so that's why we focus on becoming magnetic first. And in that as well also includes the clarity of your career and where you want to be going. But yeah, in terms of scalability, to be honest with you, Brian, I would love to figure out a way to make this more scalable. And I think it's something that I will definitely work on in 2025 and 2026. It's probably going to look more like group coaching because I am limited by time. Time is our only actual like limited resource. Everything else can be built and made, but because of the time constraint, I'm not sure what that's going to look like from a scalability perspective. But I've got plenty of years of entrepreneurship ahead of me, and I'm excited to kind of problem solve and figure that out.
Yes, 100%. And I'm going to tack on to that. I'm 16 years into my journey, and you've mastered the hardest part of it, which is do something that you freaking love. I remember when I had Nat Harward on with me to celebrate, I believe it was episode 750, but episodes are flying by these days. And he was asking me, how do you reach this? The average podcast, I think it's something crazy like 25 episodes is the median. 50% of shows will never make it beyond 25 episodes. And my honest answer when Nat asked me, how do you blow past that, is just, I actually like it. Like the reason why we have over 1,000 episodes is because I love podcasting. I love serving people. I love interviewing amazing entrepreneurs like yourself, Ellie. So that's the hardest part of the equation. You're right. Scale, it figures itself out over time. So with all that in mind, Ellie, I expect you to rock this last question because it's the only question that I ask that's the same for every episode. And that is, what's your one best piece of advice? The one takeaway, knowing that we're being listened to by wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs all over the world at all different stages of their entrepreneurial journey. And for you, I'm going to inject as well, because you introduced it to the conversation. Also, people who have their own limiting beliefs in a million different capacities. What's that one thing that you want to leave them with today?
I know you also really like action. So I'm going to put in an actionable piece of advice here. I can't take credit for it. I didn't come up with this, but it has been the number one thing that has helped me the most out of anything I've ever done. And that is, grab a notebook and a pen. Can't do this on the laptop. Don't do it on your phone. Grab a notebook and a pen. Go somewhere quiet where you can't be distracted. And take however long it takes to write down, start to finish, in full and complete detail, what your ideal normal Tuesday looks like 10 years from now. And you have to do a normal Tuesday because it's got to be a work day. It's got to be a day that's not a holiday. It's just your average Tuesday. Write down start to finish what you're eating, what you do first thing in the morning, what book you're reading, who you're spending your time with, how you're spending your time, every single detail 10 years from now. And then make that your guiding post and figure out, how can I get there? So my 10-year plan looks like, or I guess kind of 10-year goal, 10-year ideal Tuesday looks like living in a house and having a husband and continuing to run my business and continuing to live a healthy lifestyle and continuing to play ultimate frisbee. And so sometimes when I get lost in the weeds or I forget where I'm headed, I go back to that 10-year plan. Does this align with where I want to be in 10 years? And I think when you write it out in so much detail, it can really motivate you. And I look forward to the day in 10 years from now when I read it and I see how close it is. And so when I'm thinking about my goals, I currently live in an apartment. I'm currently single. I do still play ultimate frisbee, so that one's already checked off. But I think about what are the things that I want in 10 years, and is the action that I'm taking contributing and in alignment with that 10-year where I'm going to be in 10 years. So that is my one piece of actionable advice that I want to give to all aspiring and current entrepreneurs. Take the time to do that exercise. It will help you so much.
Yes, I so appreciate that advice and that action for all of our listeners worldwide, because truth be told, Ellie, the one thing that I've learned in life is when you have that plan, when you write it down, when you are so clear in the direction you want to go in, it's going to happen. We don't get to choose when it happens or how it happens, but it's going to happen with many twists and turns along the way. But gosh, I know at the deepest parts of my being that what you're saying is so true for all of us. So listeners, that is a direct call to action from Ellie here today. Ellie, you have been such a shining example in so many ways. The way that you show up as the subject matter expert that you are, but also the way that you show up as an entrepreneur. And I'm so grateful to tag this on to your labels here today as a very valued member of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur community. I'm so grateful for all of that. So drop some links on us. Where can listeners find your business and find out more about all the great work that you're doing?
rockandsecure.com. That's the best way to learn about my coaching, and best way to connect with me is LinkedIn. Ellie Hoekman on LinkedIn.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Super easy to remember, though. I love the name of your business, Ellie. rockandsecure.com. Super easy. You'll also find her personal LinkedIn link down below in the show notes. You don't have to remember any of this. You can click right on through. Otherwise, Ellie, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.